All right. It is about time. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon from wherever you are. My name is Mark Anthony Akem. I am the founder of Agile 17 LLC, and I'm excited to be your host today. Before we got started, I would want to take some time to introduce our panelists. Can everyone hear me very clearly?
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. All right. So with us here today is Ola Okegbemi. Ola Okegbemi is a software craftsman with an engineering background who obviously helps founders translate their ideas into more innovative products as they seek to solve identified problems in their communities. He's also always an eager person to share his knowledge, which he's doing here today, and mentors others as well as receive feedback to improve himself. So with that, we're going to say welcome Ola to the session today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Already. And then next, we're going to go to Dr. Iretiu Oluwa Kerele. Dr. Ireti is a cybersecurity professional with about 10 years of experience in information security, data privacy, regulatory privacy, implementation of security controls, and risk governance. She specializes in privacy and as well identifying management, security awareness, cybersecurity governance, security assessment, and policy formulation. That's an extensive resume, Dr. Ireti, but I do want to welcome you again to the session.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
All right. Awesome. And then next, we have here is Mira Abdogu. Mira Abdogu is a digital transformation coach and a marketing strategist with a passion for sustainability, tech education, and women empowerment. I do want to say welcome, Mira, to the session.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Awesome. Alrighty. And then last but not the least is Helen Oluyemi. Helen Oluyemi is a cybersecurity professional with experience in the financial institutions or financial sector and managing cybersecurity projects as well. She helps organizations understand and prioritize risk while securing information assets. Welcome, Helen, and it was good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty. So that said, we are going to go ahead and kick off what we have to talk about today, cybersecurity in the remote work environment. As you all know, there are quite a few things that have happened. The geopolitics, interconnectivity, talent shortage continues to plague the field of cybersecurity. And these are, according to Essentials 2023 cybersecurity report, that 93% of executives believe that most critical risk we face are geopolitical risk. 86% of those also believe that we're going to have a catastrophic event within the next 2 years. That's not too far away from now. This is 2024. So we're looking at most between now and 2025. And then 43% of executives also believe that such event will have significant material impact. While 28%, according to Splunk, believe that they are cybersecurity resilient. That's a very low percentage given the situation that we face. While 91% of them are using generative AI, and of that 91%, 65% don't know the implications of leveraging generative AI. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very critical scenario that we face, which brings us to the first question we're going to be talking about today. What is really the difference when we talk about cybersecurity, data privacy, and things of this sort? What is the difference between data privacy and cybersecurity? And I will start off with Helen, since she was the last person we introduced. Helen? Helena, you with us?
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was talking to myself. Don't mind.
that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, so I said personally I would say cybersecurity and data privacy are twin brothers. They are from the same family. And maybe a brother or two brothers or two sisters. And it's kind of they are kind of intertwined, to be very honest. I think there is this different perspective around, or in fact, you can even say some people would even say there is difference between information security and cybersecurity and data privacy. And nowadays, most of the time we kind of use them, interchangeably, use them together. Cybersecurity professional and information security professional. But I think they work hand in hand. There is no cybersecurity without data privacy, and there's no data privacy without cybersecurity. And I would say data privacy really means how can you, protect your confidential data, your PII data, which is personally identifiable information data, and how can company ensures that um, their customer data or their client data have been protected from cyber attacks. And I would say cybersecurity is now like maybe the technical implementation or the controls to prevent your data from being exposed to the internet. So data privacy is like a techniques, or yeah, data privacy means preventing or protecting your personal data from cyber attack, and cyber security could be like controls that you have to put in place to prevent your data. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Helen, for providing that context. Next, we're going to move to Dr. Reti. Dr. Reti, in your experience and exposure in this area, how would you say, in terms of this difference, bringing the whole idea of CIA, right? The confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility to information and data. What relevance does that have to data privacy and cybersecurity?
Okay, that's a very good question. So bringing CIA to data privacy and cybersecurity, I'll just start with data privacy. Just like Helen has mentioned, it has to do with protection of data, most especially personally identifiable information, which is called the PII. Now, when you're talking about confidentiality, it's just, you said protection. I don't want to see a data that is confidential, which is mine, that I've said is confidential. If I'm doing business with an organization and they have my confidential information, I don't want to see it out there. That is what data privacy is about. I want the organization to be able to protect that data in such a way that I would know that I can trust them and my data is safe. All right. When you move to integrity, whatever it is that I have with them, I don't want it to be tampered with. I want my data to remain the same. So from the point of storage, processing, or whatever it is that they are doing, my data must remain the same. It's just like when you have an account with a bank, if your balance is 1,000 naira, for example, or 1,000 pounds, at the time you are going back to that bank, you don't want it to be tampered with. If transactions have happened, yes, you know it has happened, but it has to remain what it is. And from the point of availability, at the point where you need your data or your information, you want it to be available to you. If I want to remove my 1,000 naira today, I don't want to hear stories that a server is down or they have been breached and all their money is gone. I just want to have it. I want it to be available to me, and that is it. So from cybersecurity perspective, when you look at different types of controls like preventive controls, corrective controls, detective controls, all those controls are working hand in hand to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. That's just the overall goal. So you're saying organizations are putting preventive controls in place because they are protecting data. They want to protect information. When you go to an office, for example, and you see maybe a security guard, the security guard is there for a reason. Why? Because if there's no security guard, by assumption, it is possible that someone just walks into the office and steals something there. So that's a preventive control. Why are they doing that? Because of confidentiality of information, integrity, and availability. Same thing with detective controls and corrective. So overall, security posture in an organization ties to implementation of controls like Helen has talked about. And in the real sense, we are implementing those controls because of CIA. Cybersecurity is just, I mean, the easy way out is just to look at it from the standpoint of CIA. We want to always have confidentiality when we are talking about our information. We want to always have integrity, and we want our data and information to always be available to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ireti, for providing that context. And I'll shift gears a little bit and go bounce back and forth a little to Ola. In your experience, right, what are some of the inherent things as far as how have you seen organizations kind of leverage the classification of data, what should be confidential, what should really be available to people, and what are some of the things they've leveraged, do you think, in your experience, to ensure that confidentiality is upheld at any given time? Ola, that would be your question. I think you're on mute. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. If I would answer your question, you would ask, I think your question is quite layered, right?
Yeah.
So I'll pick.
And I can re-ask that again just to make sure
All right, that'll be
it's not too.
That'll be
But
helpful.
in terms of again, in terms of the CI, confidentiality is very key. Dr. Reti had made mention of PII, personal identifiable information.
Yeah.
You have PHI, personal health information as well, right? So within your context and your experience with organizations you've worked with, what have you seen them do to ensure and continuously carry on that confidentiality of information and data? What are some of the practices that you've been privy to?
All right. Thank you so much for clarifying that. It's quite helpful. So usually, for me, my standpoint is every data is sensitive, right? How important it is, something else. How debilitating the leak of that data is something else entirely. But for every organization standpoint, you should strive, right, to protect all data, right? It does not matter what your definition of sensitive or personal information is, right? So that should be the first, that's usually first consideration, right? You really don't want any data breach. You don't want at any point in time how insignificant, because it's subjective, right? So first thing is to prioritize every information you collect from your client or from your customers, right? However sensitive or personal it is, like however inconsequential, natural, or mundane as it may seem, right? It's not your responsibility to share. If your user wants to share them, they go elsewhere and share. If they want the public to know, they can't make the public know. Your responsibility is to take the data that you receive from your users and protect it, right, without any breach. And then some data could be categorized as sensitive, because they could be exposing, they could have certain effect on the users. Say for instance now, like financial institutions, for instance. Now, so we've had several breaches of attacks on Flutterwave platform, and the trustworthiness of the platform, in relation to the human data. So you have emotional help platform. Recently, BetterHelp, I think a US company will somehow misappropriated, or disclose data inadvertently anyway, without the consent of the users. This kind of information could have debilitating effect, right, on their customers, right? So this data are usually perceived as the sensitive ones, and some hey, it's not, but no. Like, usually they encourage, when you build products, to include data privacy policies and all of that. And although most people don't read it, but it is when there's a breach that you understand that you are expected to be held responsible, for the data. So whatever data it is that your user have not consented to disclosing, or that you've not expressly communicated how it should be used, or how it should be accessed, or what you are using it for, is meant to remain unbreached and not accessible to the general public. So it's an agreement between you and your customers, and you have to see it as such. Yeah.
Because you have to, obviously, the owners, the different classifications of that who owns the data, who is the supplier, who is the guardian, and things of those classifications that do matter in that case. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and thank you, Allah, for providing that context. I'm going to shift gears a little bit to Murad. As somebody who is in that space of handling projects, and also who have done a little bit of work in the marketing space, you understand the impact, the material impact of a breach, right? The reputational damage it can cause to a brand. Not only that, even by when you do your projects too. Um, how do organizations within this context of understanding the difference between privacy and cybersecurity, how have you seen them include that by design when building out solutions, right? Is it something, because everything starts with a project, right? We running the project is something that you have to think about security all the way. So how have you seen that be something that organizations pay very close attention to? And what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. But due to a little network lag I had in between, I sort of got lost. So do
Okay.
you mind saying that again?
Absolutely. So I was asking, right, how do you think organizations should start thinking about security, whether it's around data or cybersecurity by design, especially when implementing a product or building out a project or doing a project to build a product, right? How do you think they should be thinking about security by design?
Okay, so I think Ola basically mentioned, he highlighted a little bit of that when he was speaking. Like, before you start a project, prioritizing it's very important. Prioritizing the fact that, okay, you're definitely going to need data, understanding, okay, what data do we need during the course of this project, understanding it and understanding the laws and policies concerning those data. And not just that, also communicating that, as you go through the project, communicating that to, the stakeholders and those concerned. And like Ola mentioned, I think from a marketing perspective, for instance, let me take that. There are cases where you sort of like fill a form and you see a disclaimer and they let you know that, okay, this is how your data is going to be used, from henceforth, we're going to release this data to third-party apps and all of that. So there's that form of communication, okay, this is how it's going to be used. So you have to also factor that, from design, know that, okay, these are the channels that we're going to use, and this is how it's going to be communicated. All of this has to be planned out, from start. You don't want to go in just, head on, because some people just, launch out projects and they don't even consider this as a factor. They just go in and they know that, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to need this data, but they don't usually factor in how this data is going to be protected. They don't factor that in. They just go in, starting the projects, and they're just going head on, straight up from that. But this is something that needs to actually be considered even from, from the start of the project, from the planning phase of the project. You need to actually factor in, like Ola said, prioritize the data. Generally, every data is important, but most especially the ones where that has been communicated, and personal information, personal data, you have to actually prioritize those data, just sensitive information, and ensure that, they are being used as communicated and protected.
Absolutely, absolutely. You make a point there, being able to prioritize it. And in my opinion, as a professional too, who's been in that space, who does coaching, I think a lot of it also depends on thinking about the culture. The culture matters in any organization, which kind of takes us to the next question, right? Because an organization that has the culture of protecting data and thinking about security by design also thinks about the people who are going to be interfacing with that data on a day-to-day basis, right? So that said, I think the role of the employees matter a lot. Understanding, knowledge, and information they have, to your point, Mirab, would impact how well the security solution gets designed. So with that, I'm going to ask this question. What is the role of employees? What do you think the role of employees should be when it comes to data privacy and cybersecurity? And I'm going to start off with Ola, if you can shed more light on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll be happy to. Oftentimes from my experience as an engineer and your relations with clients and also the users, the myth, the assumption is the engineers are meant to wire in security into the system, right? It's your responsibility as an engineer to be security conscious as you're building. But, that's a myth. It does not hold, right? Employees, people, actually, matter of fact, have more role to play than even the engineers. In any security system, humans are the first line of defense, right? And unfortunately, also, they are also the weakest link, right, in any security system. All right. So it is expedient that the users, the customers, the onus is more on the customers than the engineers, actually, more on the employees, more on the end users, right, than the builders, as it were. So this orientation, first off, creates that understanding of, hey, I have a role to play in ensuring that my data is protected, right? I have a role to play in ensuring that this organization or this product that I'm using hold on to the end of the bargain. Like it is an effort in union, right? With that out of the way, one way that employees can actually, protect or help, in the data privacy and cybersecurity instances, for instance, password hygiene, right? Being it's really important, right? A lot of people are quite lazy about when generating passwords. As simple as it is, I mean, it's the single form of entry into any system, right? So it's glossed over, right? It's glossed over. So use strong, unique passwords for different accounts, however tough it may be, however difficult it may be for you to remember, right? You have password managers, depending on the browser that you use right now, and they are quite protected. So you use password managers to keep them. You don't write out sensitive information on paper. A lot of people try to, how will I put it now? In a bid to not forget credentials, they write it down, keep it somewhere, and then it's an illusion of security, right? It's not always so, all right? And something also is like there's controlled access. You don't share information because you trust people. To be honest, there should be zero trust security, right? It's on a need to know basis, right? Although he's a friend, he's a colleague, you guys are working in the same organization, you trust him. Yes, you know you trust him. It's not about trust or no distrust. It's about mitigating the spread of data. When I know that information, this other person knows that information, the authenticity, of that data weakens, with increased knowledge. So another thing I feel employees can help is always ensure personal authorization, and that's where the 2FA comes in, the multi-layer authorization. It's not sufficient for you to put accessible information out there, right? It's not sufficient for you to have information that is accessible out there. Your biometric is personal to you, for instance. Your fingerprint, your Face ID, they're personal to you, except if there is high level of intentional, theft, but at that point, it's mitigated to some extent, right? So social engineering would not leak that, right, for instance. So all of these ways are measured. And incident reporting, that's really, really critical. A lot of people gloss over their instinct. They look at the situation and they be like, this could mean nothing, and they gloss over it, they overlook it. Meanwhile, like they say, before a fire, there's a smoke, right? So if you are able to pay attention, to anomalies, to things that look suspicious. If they look suspicious, they are suspicious, right? So you might as well, be quick and alert and agile to report these incidences, and it should, the organization in this part now should not grow wary of such alarms, right? Whereby you become complacent, when it comes, you are like, hey, this is nothing, and you dismiss it. It does not really encourage, right, the employees to want to make these moves to reports and stuff like that. But all of these are measures from my experience, and also in relation with clients, and the end users, about how customers can, or employees, right, can ensure or play their role, in ensuring data is protected, and cyber breaks and attacks, are mitigated to the best minimum. Yeah.
Absolutely, I can't agree any less. And I'm going to shift gears to Helen, to kind of get your thoughts as well. It's one thing for what employees should do. It's another thing too for the organization to provide the necessary awareness that should be in place. In your experience, what are some of the practices out there that you think organizations have leveraged to create some of this awareness, and provide some deeper rooted processes, or put some deeper rooted processes in place to ensure that employees are continuously paying attention to data privacy and cybersecurity?
Yeah, I'm just going to start from this, I think, and it's from personal experience over the last few years. I know that sometimes it's easier for us to say employees should, go through necessary training and awareness. We just use like Know Before or other training platform to send bunch of trainings to them, especially in banks in a regulated environment, and then you ask them to go through 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour training. And most of the training, if you click next, you can actually finish the training within 10 minutes. And then, as a security professional, maybe you kind of set a time like, okay, you have to complete this training. You can't complete this training until after 30 minutes. And so what employees do, or what I do sometimes, because I set the training, I will just leave my screen and then just do other things. And then once it's like 30 minutes, just click on next, and then, submit. Imagine this is me, a security professional, doing this. I guess because sometimes I feel like, oh, I set up the training, I know this, and then that is fine. Then imagine a marketing analyst or an engineer who has a bunch of lines of code to write. And then I'm just saying, oh, because we have to do monthly training, is part of the policies and controls, part of what ISO or SOC 2 is requesting us to do. And so we can actually tick the box. I can imagine that over 50% will not do the training like intentionally, really, because they just want to tick the box. And one thing that I've done, and that's actually really working, is how can we actually create like a good culture within the team, within all employees? Because if you have a good culture, then you are not just telling them to read 47 lines of 47 pages of information security policies, very boring, and they wouldn't really do that, right? And so one thing we do, I saw this online, I think, was it like few weeks ago, about a organization that kind of embedded like some sort of reward in the data privacy documentation. So, most of the time, if you go online and you browse, you just click I consent without reading it. Yes, I do that a lot. And so it's like giving whoever sees the information like a bottle of wine. And I think it was until 3 months after that website was up that somebody could point out that information, like, oh, because you've seen it, just send us the screenshots and we'll give you a bottle of wine. I was like, oh, that is interesting. So that means if I need to tell employees of our organization to kind of maybe read a particular policy, like BYOD, accepted use policy, maybe this is some sort of reward that you can actually add. And whoever kind of pick this up in all the 8 pages or 10 pages document can actually get like a reward, or maybe the first 2 or the first 3. And so something like that kind of interests them to, when you set up a training next time, it's kind of interest them to read, not religiously, but because they really want to read it. And, that's number 2 would be, another thing would be, I know what I do. I'm just kind of giving like an instance, like real life scenario of how we can actually create a good culture, positive security culture amongst team. So at the end of every month, whoever reports like a phishing email or a data breach email or a suspicious email, maybe the first 5 people, that reports something really malicious, we give them like an Amazon voucher. That means if by tomorrow somebody, maybe an analyst or an engineer, receive like an email that is maybe not even malicious but a bit suspicious, they can always report any email they think, oh, this might be legitimate or not, and then ask a security analyst or a security expert to, analyze and feedback if it is malicious or not. And that has kind of really reduced the number of phishing attempts or security attempts that we have over a couple of months, because everyone is always eager to, sometimes you kind of receive like a good email as malicious, but it's the work of a security analyst to kind of, analyze all this, and that kind of, make everyone being security conscious. Because I think human generally, the way it works is if there is a reward attached to something, you are ginger to do it, right? You are kind of like, oh, I want to do it because there is something attached to it. Or maybe at the end of the quarter, there's like an employee of the quarter, that is more cybersecurity conscious, that kind of a thing. And there was this last one we did, it's called a security assessment proficiency. Yeah, security assessment proficiency, like how can we now test the knowledge of, our employees? And then just kind of set like simple security scenario-based question, like 10 or 20 questions, and ask people to just, go through the assessment and do it. It's no training, just the 10 minutes. I mean, just the 10
Yes.
questions and answer it. And it's really, the result is kind of nice and shocking, because the average score was 88%, which means that our
Interesting.
security culture has really improved over time. And it's us trying to, add incentive, add rewards, add recognition to all. And they never see security person as someone that disturbs their work, because I think most engineers, and I'm sure Holla would say, okay, yes, because when you mention something around, oh, we are telling engineers to, when you write your code, have security in mind. That it's not that easy. Yes, we agree. And that is why we have tools in place that kind of enable engineers, like SaaS tool. So
Yeah.
like while you are developing your, before you push your code to production, you kind of get like, oh, there is an issue that you need to fix. And an example is like Snake or Vera code out there that will tell you, okay, you need to kind of fix a particular thing on this line of code, or you are using an outdated library. And what we do, or what an organization can do, is, okay, when there is a high or critical vulnerability, while writing your code, it will not even deploy. It will fail automatically. The pipeline it will not build pipeline at all. And that way you
Correct.
can go back to a security professional and, ask, maybe there is no fix at the moment. Then we can, okay, let's bypass this for the next 30 days or 60 days. But we do threat assessment as to why maybe we need to, allow you to push this to production or not. And that way it kind of shows that if at the point of writing code, we've been able to filter high or critical vulnerabilities, imagining what would happen at the point of pen testing, because there are a lot of processes in your security development lifecycle that are kind of checking your security,
Correct.
pipeline. That way, by the time you deploy to production environment and you do your pen testing, you might most likely find little low or medium vulnerabilities. And
Yeah.
that kind of makes projects easier for people, make work easier for people. And I also go back to what Merab said about, when you were asking something around data. I think one thing that we also do is there is a DPR here, which is called a data privacy impact assessment. So if we know that we're collecting a particular data or type of data from our customer, from our clients, we sort of do like a DPR and know, okay, if this data is exposed to this organization or to to an external threat or an external factor, what would be the impact on our business? That is one
Yeah.
key thing that we also do during project and before we kind of deploy to live. And roles of employee, really, it's like you said, password,
Yeah.
MFA. You can't really say they should set a password, but there's always like a control in place that ensures that you can't just have um a weak password, right? You can't even deploy it. You have to follow the controls that we have in place. I mean,
Absolutely.
another thing
Absolutely.
would be MFA. You can't even log into, a
Yeah.
confidential data without having an MFA. And there is always like a rollback, which is a role-based access control in place that kind of gives you you only have access to what you need per time. And if you need to kind of upgrade your access, you need to go through like a PIM, which is a privilege PAM, privilege access management, that kind of upgrade your level just-in-time access as to when you need
Correct.
it. Lots of controls in place that we kind of ensure that would also kind of encourage employees or enable their work rather than seeing us as a disturbance or as a policeman, because most times they see us as security people. They're always there to disrupt our work, but we kind of try to empower you and enable you and makes works easier for you. Yeah, so
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I may summarize, there are quite a few things there, but there's very key things that I picked up from what you said. I mean, especially when it comes to the organization, whether it's leveraging automated tools to obviously automate your process as much as you can, so that you're using technology to actually drive feedback as quickly as possible. Bring in the culture too. The culture matters a lot, the culture you create, and the culture needs to tie some kind of reward system to it, to make it more palatable to everybody who sees it, making people feel like, you know what, if I do this, at least I can get that. But and then the other aspect of it is more in line of the testing, continuous testing. Test often, test early as possible. Those are very great points. But I just wanted to pivot a little bit. And as I go on into question number three, where I would want to get some really, how does one handle cybersecurity attacks? Especially considering in the remote environment. Now you've educated your employees, you have them all situated, the processes are laid out. Um, but the remote context of work also presents its own challenges, right? Because you have people, rather than everybody coming into one location, right, and connecting to the wire to the WAN of the organization, the wide area network, and staying within the context of a single network, you're having people connect to your local network from multiple other networks, and you can't really know the reliability or how robust, right, those networks are and who has access. Think about it. Um, I have a culture in my home, even when I'm not using my laptop, it has to be locked. But in some cases, I forget, right? You're working from home, you're in your own comfort space or place of comfort, and you don't really see security challenges or more security conscious because you feel, it's my family, it's my friend, it's my. I was going to bring in Dr. Reti on that to kind of, how do you think we should be thinking about these things within that context when it comes to the remote working context, right? What are some of the things you've seen? What are some of the um, approaches you think we should be leveraging to, whether as an organization or as individuals, to ensure we're also set up right to prevent such attacks in a remote context?
Okay, good question. So I'm going to come from the people, process, and technology approach, starting with people. So people talking about users who are employees in an organization. So I like to say that you can only be a strong link in your organization if you are a strong link personally. So what that means is that security culture goes beyond me just coming to the organization and trying to do things right. How about even in your own personal life, regarding your personal information? Are you careful when it comes to the things you put out there? For example, are you the type of person who would go to just click on a link because someone has sent it to you and you feel that this person is trusted without any form of verification? So if you are not a strong link personally, I mean, get it into the organization, then you pose as a weak link. So coming from that perspective, I think users have to also take responsibility, which is very important. It's very easy to say that, I mean, it's the organization's responsibility. But when you think about it, you find that users have a role to play. Companies can have all the sophisticated technologies, all the good processes in place, but without the commitment of users to make these things work, it's going to, of course, lead to issues that users will also be affected in. So from that people's standpoint, I would like to say that personal culture is important when it comes to security. I always tell people that security is a lifestyle. the moment you see cybersecurity as a lifestyle, I mean, you've already saved the company you're working in a lot of stress, because nobody will have to force you to read a policy. Nobody will have to force you to accept an acceptable use policy. Nobody will have to force you to do the right thing when standing up from your desk, even if you are working remotely, and all of that. So you already know that this is a culture, this is part of me. When you see someone that looks strange around you, even in the work environment, nobody will have to force it before you ask the right question. So I think from that people's standpoint, the culture is key. The next one I'll talk about is processes. Organizations need to start thinking about having solid processes in place. It's nice to have technologies. It's nice to have people who can manage these technologies, but are the processes defined? You have an access control policy. You have what you need to do when a new user needs to be onboarded into the network. Are these processes followed? I've seen cases, I mean, coming from a professional standpoint, where some organizations would say that, some employees would say that, I know this. I mean, I've been doing this for 5 years and I understand the process. But what happens when you leave that company? So these processes need to be documented at every point in time. Does the organization allow people to bring in removable media, for example? Can they collect data using an external drive? Those kind of things. How clear is it within the organization? Is it documented? Because these are some of the risks that are seen out there. How do users connect to the network, whether remotely or within the premises? Is it well defined? Are the processes clear? So from the process perspective, I think organizations need to do more in terms of ensuring that these processes are right. Anybody can leave the company. I mean, if you are not, we've even seen cases where owner of companies decide that someone else should take over, so don't ever have the mindset that nobody can leave an organization. And then you say that, oh, this guy is good. He has been here with us for 6 years and he has told us about his loyalty. Wait until they triple his salary in another organization. That's when you will find out that loyalty is just because he has not faced another temptation anywhere else. What I'm just saying is that don't be too trusting to say that the guy that knows the process is solid and is doing it well, so we don't need to document it. So from that perspective, it's very important. Now going to technology, ensuring that the right technology is in place. What is the baseline? I always tell companies, I mean, from my consulting expertise, I tell companies that use best practice. These best practice standards and frameworks, they are there so that you don't have to start cracking your head on the best set of technologies or controls to implement. They already have the things that they feel that, based on security, if you have the bare minimum, your life is going to be better. I mean, as an organization. So why do you want to start reinventing the wheel? You don't have to do that. So best practice, ISO standard, network security. If a user is connecting to the network remotely, they should do it through secure communication channel. So virtual private network, which is VPN, is a way to do that, and ensure that that is being monitored and is being managed properly. Access control. So standard has said that access control, when early based access control, people should only have access to what they need. So, I mean, I've seen cases where an organization would say things like, oh, you are in a particular role, another person is coming in. They are not even sure if they've escalated privileges for someone who has been there before. They just give the entire access, the entire privilege that person has to the new person. I mean, things have to be done properly. And these standards are there to guide in terms of all of these things. So there's no need reinventing the wheel. Just come, use this best practice. Best practice has said that users should, at least on their devices, they should have antivirus at the bare minimum. So every user system in the organization, why not? Apart from having these antivirus, anti-malware solutions on these systems, are they up to date? Because that's another question. If a system has left the network for a while and it's not connected and has not received updates, are you still sure that this system is being protected? So, I mean, all of these things are there based on best practice. The question is, are organizations making use of it? Again, I like to say that for best practices, the things I've seen is becoming abused now. And what that means is that organizations are just using it that let us tick the box because a compliance regulation has come that we need to comply to this. And they are spending money and not getting value. So best practice, again, people process technology should be from the standpoint of overall culture, just like I think Ellen has mentioned and also Ola. Don't miss the culture part of it, because if you implement from compliance standpoint, you miss culture, then something will be missing in that process. And it means that eventually you may be compliant, but you're still not too far away from a breach, because it's just a matter of time when there's no culture, So that culture
Great point.
key. That culture is key. So when looking at what are the things we need to implement, always having at the back of your mind people, process, technology, using best practices. But the most important thing is that culture must remain. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's a very, very solid advice. People, process, technology. Pay attention to that. And I was going to kind of switch gears. We do have about 15 minutes to the end of our session, but at the same time, before we proceed, I'd wanted to talk to Mirabi as a project person, right? Because everything starts with the project. Solutions, as much as strategy comes top down, execution of the work goes bottom up, right? So that means we build solutions downstream, build out the solution in line with the vision that the executives have, right? And in most cases, you also find out that it's the teams that are responsible for having this whole built-in security, built-in processes, application and implementation of those processes. How do you think teams should think about it? Should they be thinking of working agreements? Should they be thinking about consistently reviewing their processes? And how should they really embed that into the solution? Excuse me. Excuse me. Mirab, that would be your question.
Sorry, can you take that question again?
Okay. So how should teams that work on projects, being someone that has worked with a lot of teams, projects, implementations, right? How should teams think about having an agreement? What's the relevance of having a working agreement to ensure that we're crystallizing how we adhere to the processes, the culture, and even when new people join our teams, they always know that these are the laid down rules, these are the laid down procedures, and we build on top of it.
I think from my viewpoint, one of the key things to note is understanding that this is a process and it's not just a one-time thing, because there's a tendency for when, starting out a project to, start out in terms of, okay, considering these factors, considering, cybersecurity and data privacy from the start, but not, understanding that it's a process and it's not just something that is just considered at the building phase, but all throughout the lifeline of the project as well. So understanding and then, factoring this part of it into the different phases of the project, from when you go from planning, even during the planning phase, down to the implementing stage, down to implementing the project, and even after, what happens after the project is done, it's very important. Factoring this in when, managing projects is important. And I think when it comes to teams, another thing I would like to, also mention, I think Irati, really hammered on that. People, process, technology. So this is me not coming from a professional aspect of things, but I think when also considering that it's very important because a lot of organizations tend to overlook the importance of education, cybersecurity education, when it comes to their employees, when it comes to those in the organizations, because the organization is not just the name, it's not just the building, it's the people. It's the people. You might put these systems in place, but if these people are not, if they are not educated, if they are not aware of how the processes should work, it's not going to be effective. it's not going to be effective. So understanding that, like, cybersecurity awareness and education is key. And like I said, not coming, this is me not coming from a professional. You might think these are things that people should know. Trust me, a lot of people do not even have it. And coming down to projects I've worked with a lot of small business where we have like one team or just 3 people, and they don't even have a budget to cover to afford a cybersecurity team or experts all at the same time working with them also at the lifeline of the project or what their business. Most of these people do not even have basic cybersecurity awareness cybersecurity education. So considering this, it is very important. It is very important, the people making sure that they are also educated, making sure that they have, information, making sure that you seek for professional help. In the case where there is none, seek for professional help. Yeah, that's also factor that in, because a lot of organizations might feel like, okay, this is something we could overlook until there's an issue. I think Ola mentioned until there's an issue, and then you see that there's a bridge and then you have everybody running helter-skelter, and that could just hinder the whole project, maybe cause like a bridge or cause like a delay or something during the project. But this could have been easily avoided if proper steps were taken from the beginning of the project, and if all of this were factored in, and if there was even a budget made for that from the onset. So they end up spending more, wasting time, wasting resources, and all of that.
Absolutely. So in other words, if I heard you clearly, it's also important for teams to have working agreements, to really think about it and then evolve the culture. Don't just keep it as a standing rule. I often say, when I sit down with executives or we're talking about transformation, I say transformation, I call it the 3 alphas that kind of crystallize what you do in transformation. You adopt the process, you adapt to it. Your people have to accept it, because it's always the people that do the implementation, they do the work. So driving, connecting your people, to your point, makes a lot of sense. Focus on your people, provide the right education, get them to see on the other side why it's important for us to have these processes and to follow these laid down rules that we have within the organization. And then that starts impacting how you adopt it. That starts impacting how you adapt to that environment. So great point you make there. So shifting gears to question number 4. Regulations. Or standards, it's kind of like a gray area, because depending on the organization you find yourself, even country by country, it varies, right? Which is one of the key challenges. Even looking at it today, according to us, the report again in 2023-2024 report, security report, besides the geopolitical situation where you're having too many crises, east versus west, west versus east, north versus south, south versus north, this whole regulatory instances are changing the landscape. If you move from the United States to China, the way they look at regulations are totally different from the way we look at it here, from the way we look at it in Nigeria, from the way we look at it in Russia, from the way you look at it in some other places of the world, maybe in India or some other place, right? And it creates a lot of tension, because if you look back again at the General Data Privacy Regulation, the GDPR, in Europe, it says you can't move data. Before you do something, you have to obviously let the owner of the data know what you're using their data for, when you're moving it, where you're going to keep it, and things of that sort. And companies have gotten fined heavily. Google, one of them, Facebook, and so many of these other big multinational companies. And that could create retaliation, right? Because if you find a US based company heavily, you have British based companies or European based companies here. You have European based companies in China, if you find them. So there could be retaliation, right? Which now brings us into the politics of it. So how do we ensure these regulations get adhered to? Considering this whole strife around the geopolitics, the economics, and all these things around it. And this is an open question. Whoever wants to take a first stab at it, you can please take a stab at it because it's not just something that is more peculiar to one industry alone.
Okay, I can try for 1 to 2 minutes because this is also my strong point. Adhering to industry regulations and standards is very critical, and I mean, a lot of organizations now, they literally don't have a choice. They just have to comply to standards and regulations. Why is it so? Because the best practice requirements are, like I said, they're like guidelines that would help organizations to attain good security from the standpoint of putting preventive controls in place, putting detective controls in place, and putting corrective controls in place. Why? Because when you look at cybersecurity, the first point is prevention. I mean, when you go to a hospital, for example, you hear a doctor say, come and do health test or health check because prevention is better than cure. If you detect on time that you have constant headache or fever, and if they declare that there's something in your blood, they'll give you drugs quickly so that you can get better before it leads to something that will be terminal. It's exactly the same thing with cybersecurity. When you put preventive controls in place, which these best practice regulations and standards have outlined, it's better to put those practices and controls in place quickly so that organizations can be ahead and try to stay safe and secure from any potential breach or attack. Now, detective, some controls come as detective. So detective is different from preventive, and I'm touching on these controls to understand why it's important to adhere and implement best practice. Detective, why? It helps to see what is going on within the environment and putting measures in place. We can detect and say that, yes, we need to treat this. This is something we need to look into. And when you look at corrective, when an incident has happened or when something has happened, you can be able to recover. The truth when it comes to cybersecurity, it's not really about if. Like you mentioned Facebook, you mentioned Google. You imagine that a company that is very big and well structured should not have a cyber attack, but it's not like that with cybersecurity. Attackers don't really care. If they want to attack an organization, they will do everything in their power and by every means to ensure that that organization is brought down by a cyber attack. So when the corrective controls are there, so that when the incident has happened, organizations can recover from it, which is very important. Now, all of this all together, if an organization has put all of these controls together, then they can confidently say that, yes, we can now start going for a compliance standard like the ISO 27001 or the GDPR or the NIST cybersecurity framework or other standards and frameworks that exist. This is important because they can be able to show maybe to their third parties, for example, or their customers or to regulators to say that, yes, we have done the right thing. And why is this important? Because of trust. You want to do business with an organization, you would rather do business with an organization that has the ISO 27001 than the one that does not have. Because you are trust that your data, remember when we started talking about data, you are sure that your data is safe with this organization because they are complying. Now, not to forget that there's a place for culture. Compliance is good, but organizations that forget the culture part, they struggle. It means that year in, year out, they get to comply, but they may still get breached. It doesn't mean they won't get breached. But the moment they're able to hack the culture part of it, so when they're adhering to regulations and standards, they need to also ensure that they are also improving their culture by doing different things because there's a place for compliance and there's also a place for security culture. So I'm just going to stop there. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dr. Reti. I think you hit the nail on the head, just thinking about it. I guess everything goes back to one thing, right? Culture, culture, culture. imbibe that culture. So that tells me a lot about the relevance of certain soft skills, right, in technology these days. I was having a discussion with a friend, and that was one of the conversations that came up, that regardless of what you do, soft skills matter. How you communicate, how your listening capabilities or ability to listen, not just to listen to hear what the person or respond, but also to listen and understand before you respond. I think it goes back to our executives, it goes back to our teams, it goes back to us as individuals. So you make a great point. I don't know if there is any other thoughts on adhering to these industry regulations and standards. Any perspective any of us wanted to share as well? That would be great.
Yeah, I just want to kind of you know,
Yeah.
add to what Dr. Riti said. I think she's mentioned, I mean, what I know. But one thing, yes, we talk about culture. Then she mentioned the preventive, corrective, dictative, and corrective. And then one thing that we should all know is all these regulation and standards, like we all say, they speak to culture, they speak to the three main controls we have. And then the whole addresses the CIA that was mentioned at the beginning of the session, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And sometimes, so I will give you an instance, like a real life scenario. So an organization, hey, that is based in the UK, has lots of UK clients, and the organization is ISO certified, Cyber Essential certified. The organization adheres to GDPR and the likes. And now the organization is looking at moving into US markets, right? And then US markets are now saying, oh, you need to have SOC 2 reports. And then when you look at SOC 2 reports, maybe it's like a lot of cost for the organization. But at the end of the day, just because you already have like a cyber essential, you have a good culture in place, you have your ISO, you have your cyber essential, it just only requires like few steps to get SOC 2. You don't really need to start from scratch again. And there is now DORA, I think, Digital Operational Resilience Act, that is being implemented here in Europe, and everything they all addresses CIA. It's when we have like a good culture, I think, regardless of the market space you want to kind of, move into as an organization, you really don't need to have like, add in more effort to get another compliance, another privacy law and this and that, because you have a good culture, your goal is to prevent CIA. And then with that, you can always, try to adhere to different frameworks, because there is already like how do I put it? You have like a home already. And then regardless of how many keys you choose to have, because you have a big home, you can actually take all of them in. And that home is like a culture. And the purpose of that home is to have your CIA in place. And then any other regulations could come in and you're able to accommodate them. Yeah. So it's all about the culture, CIA, and the three means of controls: preventive, detective, and corrective action. So yeah.
Absolutely. Ola, you wanted to chime in there somewhere?
Yeah. I was going to trust. I mean, Ellen and Loreti, as nailed it. But I just felt there's one critical information that I feel I should share, and coming from personal experience, these industry regulations are continually evolving. Right, what worked 2 years ago wouldn't necessarily work this time, and I know firsthand, and the effects could really be debilitating. I think about 5 years ago, we built a product for a client, and it was okay for us, to integrate payments without necessarily collecting the card data, without necessarily aligning, all right, or adapting to a particular regulation when we are collecting the card details, right? And it worked well, but over time, we realized there was a drop in usage. People were actually, trusting us in code, right, with the card informations, and we're wondering, right, because the products are still great, the service is still working fine, but when it comes to point of payment, we experienced a lot of drawbacks. There were some measures that we tried to put in place. If it was maybe the cost was too high and stuff like that, but none of those strategies worked. right? And it was at that point that we realized we are failing in a particular regulation, and that's the PCI DSS regulation, right? It is critical. At this point, it was not pronounced, it was not mandated, but in some European countries, there were regulations. But we in Africa, we were a bit slow to catching up, and that is why you have to keep an eye out, for the update, right? You have to consistently and continually monitor it, especially when it comes to data privacy on social platforms. With the current issue with TikTok and Shoshu, you would begin to observe new policies have been implemented. It's just a constantly evolving landscape. So what worked last year may not necessarily work this year. And then beyond the trustworthiness which is being affected, you also get to lose customers, right? And then there's and it just affects a whole lot of things. So it is really, really critical, important for us to not just adhere, but to continually keep an eye out, for updates and changes over time. And I think that will go a long way in enhancing the scalability and the growth, that we experience as an organization or as a product. Yeah, I just thought to quickly add that,
Absolutely. And how else can we do that without being agile, right? We always have to be agile. That's the best way. Mirab, you're saying something? Sorry, Mirab, you're on mute. It looks like it.
Oh, yes. I thought I was just about to mention that.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Please, chime in.
Yeah. So, no, I just want to highlight just a few things. Just from the project management perspective, you get. I think one of the key things they've mentioned a lot. I've actually learned a lot from this conversation, and one of the key things I think when starting out is understanding the scope, having a defined scope of the project, and actually understanding it, and then prioritizing cybersecurity. From that phase. And then, like Ola mentioned, staying up to date with the trend. You have to stay up to date. And when it comes to the trends, we need to be flexible. I was going to mention, agility is very important at this phase, because this is a constantly evolving field. This is a constantly evolving area. You can, go during the lifetime of the project, you might find that, a new law is or policy that affects the maybe it's a product you're building or the project, and at that point, what you do, you have to assess, you have to stop and assess, what is really, happening, what's going on. And then at that phase, you also need to when you assess and understand that, this is what needs to be done, you need to sorry, the word I'm trying to figure out just skipped my head.
Yeah.
Once you assess
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. Once you assess the situation of things and understand what needs to change, at that point, you need to also consult professional. Don't be scared to, consult professionals if you don't have any at that point in time. At that point, reach out to the right professionals, cybersecurity experts, get the right information. Information is key. Information is key. Make the updates and also inform stakeholders concerned, whether they are your users, those are the organizations, and be agile.
Yes.
But you have to understand that this is an evolving field. It's not stoic, it's not static. You must be willing to understand that things could definitely, there could be unforeseen circumstances, and be flexible enough to accommodate that while still not completely changing the scope of the project and wasted resources that's been allocated for that project.
Absolutely. I mean, that kind of takes it home. Being agile, that whole agile way of looking at things, kind of gives us a perspective that we need, right? To really how we manage our backlog of issues that we have, whether they are preventive issues that we need to implement. And then considering it also gives us a way to work where you iteratively go through the whole process. You're no longer looking at the overall solution, but increments of the solution. So that way, it's a little more control to now start applying and thinking about it by design. Because in each of those iterations, you're already thinking about the design of that whole solution, right? That increment that you're delivering, and you're embedding security at every step of the way, which also begs the question, even for architects, and it brings for a wider, I would say, my looking at it from the points that we've made here, it calls to actually the reason, the need for wider collaboration, right? And cooperation across professionals, especially those who are building a solution, being more inclusive, being more communicative, and also raising the alarms of risk when you do hear them or see them. Which brings us also to the risk aspect of it. Risk associated with using Helen, you talked about BYOD earlier on, and I think that kind of flows us into that conversation, right? What are the risks in having people use their personal devices to do work?
So I think one key thing that I would say, that I've experienced would be it's kind of make incident response really difficult for us as a security engineer or a SOC analyst or a security professional. And reason being that for a BYOD, we might not really have like full control on your personal laptop. So for instance, your laptop or your devices is being infected by ransomware. It's maybe quite difficult for us to say we want to isolate your devices, right? Because we are not really managing them on our own MDM or on our own MDM policy. So it's kind of makes this response a bit tricky. And another risk would be privacy, which is like data.
I'm sorry, Helen. When you say MDM, just for the audience to understand what that
Okay,
means.
so it's mobile device management. Sorry,
Thank
mobile
you.
device management, where we so it's a endpoint solution that we kind of use to manage all endpoint devices in our organization. For instance, if you want to kind of use your phone, so because we use phone for MFA, you have to
Yeah.
register your phone on the MDM solution, and then there is what we call like a company portal if you use Microsoft and the likes, and from there you might not even be able to log in if the OS of your phone is not up to a particular version, that kind of a thing. So like we kind of us put like a control in place to ensure that devices that access your data or your environment is well protected. And that also kind of brings me back to BYOD. For instance, in an organization, if there is like a control we have in place, you can't even log into a particular tenant on the cloud space if you don't meet some level of standard. So you don't have antivirus on your laptop, it's not up to date. There are some checks that we do that it's not like you do it physically, like there are some checks in place, and without that you can't even access the organization network. But imagine if you don't have those checks in place and there's an incident breach on a user's laptop, it will be really difficult for us to carry out this incident response process because we really don't have full control on that devices.
Yeah.
And using personal devices, I think one key thing that I think is has been an issue, especially because before COVID, we all, especially in Nigeria, we all go to the office. But during COVID, most people just work remotely and without having like the controls in place to, prevent all the cybersecurity incident and its issue around data privacy. Because we work from home, maybe your cousin is around or somebody is around or your friends are around, and you never know they have like a malicious intent in heart, and maybe your guys they didn't kind of implement like a clear screen policy where when you stand up within 5 seconds, your laptop automatically locks, right? That kind of a thing. And someone, maybe your cousin that does not even have like a malicious intent, come to your laptop and then just go to the ransomware website, that kind of a thing. And you as an engineer or as a DevOps, you have your Azure tenants open, trying to work on confidential data, trying to work on your client's data and your cousin just come in and then access like a dark website or whatever, and they take over your computer and you are still while you are still logged in. It's really tricky because that can lead to a lot of privacy issue or data issue, not even by your
Absolutely.
cousin or by external factor. Another thing would be, imagine, and this is from real life example, because we all work remotely and everyone could carry his or laptop around. Imagine somebody reporting a device being missing or stolen, and it's not an organizational device,
Mm.
and you actually have, especially people that work with there, you have confidential data and there is no device encryption, like a
Yeah.
BitLock on your laptop. Compared to an organizational device, what we have in place is, even if someone stole your device, even with password or with your MFA or your biometrics, they still cannot have access to, because there is like a bit encryption, like an hardware encryption in place, that you need like a code to be able to, have access to that. Another thing would be that we can actually initiate remote wipe directly
Yeah.
from wherever in the world. But if it's a personal device, we might not even want to initiate remote wipe on your personal device. And I think everything boils down to data loss issue. Because at the end of the day, all cybersecurity incidents, ransomware attack, phishing incidents, or you kind of want to harvest my credential, all I need is to have access to that your crown jewel, right,
Mhm.
that your organization has. And so I think the most important thing, which is the real risk here, is data and privacy issue, and which kind of makes incident response, data wiping, and every other controls really difficult for engineers to implement. And I think one key thing to do this is, like we said, culture. When your employee has a good culture, good training, security conscious, that way, I think that might will reduce this, but would not 100% stop it, right? So yeah, and does
Yeah.
not even make sense for us to say we have to monitor your device, because it's your personal device. We can't say we need to put some, controls on your laptop. It doesn't just make any sense. Why not just give me a company device, that kind of a thing? Yeah. So yeah.
Mm.
In short, incident response is quite difficult to handle.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it poses that threat, and I think it's the world we live in now. Um, and to the point you just made, it's hard, right? You monitor, you don't monitor. There's always something. And if you start monitoring, because some organizations install certain apps in their browsers that keep count on the sites and things you're going to, and you can also plant an extension on your device if you're not careful, right? You plant that extension to a point where everything you're doing on your personal laptop, and that could be considered, a breach of
Privacy.
privacy
Yeah.
in that regard. So organizations too, as much as they're doing what they're doing, need to be cautious of how the extent to which they monitor. But at the same time, it's just such a thin line between those two,
Yeah.
um, if you ask me. Going to the last question for the day. Emerging trends in remote cybersecurity. I was privy to listen to something on the World Economic Forum, held by the University of Berkeley, a couple of days ago, in preparation for this as well. But they were looking at things from three standpoints, that they call it the triple T, right? I'll pull that up here very shortly. It's all around talent, trust, tempo, and talent. And I'll explain. So the trust part of it is, how do you even start thinking about both the key stakeholders in when it comes to the security space, civil society, private enterprise, and government or public enterprise. How do you get these people to start even trusting each other, collaborating more effectively? And then how do you keep up with the tempo, right? With the pace at which technology is evolving. The pace sometimes is so fast that it's hard, considering how government moves, considering availability of resources for private organizations, and then considering the civil society, right? Awareness of the trend at any given time. That becomes a totally different problem. And then the last part of it is the talent. Do we even have the talent? How many of us, it's rumored that I think according to some report that we have over 2 million, a gap of about 2 million people who have no clue about what security is all about. Over 2 million people in that space of technology that have no clue of what security implementations should be in place at any given time. And that poses a threat, right? If you look at it from those three aspects, trust, tempo, and talent. So bringing that back again to what we're talking about here with the emerging trends in this remote cybersecurity, obviously more phishing, more creative ways of hacking. There's generative AI. It's fastened or fast-tracked the pace at which your device could be hacked. Sometimes we're doing things we don't even know the outcomes. How would we position ourselves, especially for small businesses, smaller organizations growing, not the big guys? The big guys have their problems, they have the money. But look at the mid-sized guys and the little guys, right, who are struggling to keep the lights on, keep employees paid and all that. How do you think they fit into this trend? Or what would be your suggestion for them if we could have some takeaways? I'll go with Merab first, and then we'll go to Ola and then Helen. Merab, I think you're okay. Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think for small businesses who do not who most times they mostly do not have a budget to cover like building a team and solely focused on keeping their businesses or organizations secure. I think one thing I'd like to hit on is educating themselves and everyone involved in the business. Education is key, and doing that by they could also leverage on free resources, free learning resources online. Considering that maybe at the start of the business they might not have a budget for that, why they actually try to build on their budget and try to build on raising enough funds to either hire a professional, an expert in this field, or build a team. I think leveraging on learning resources and promoting that cybersecurity education and awareness within their organization or small businesses, amongst even as the owner and also for employees, is key, because at this point in time, you're more like the lifeline of the business. So if you don't do that, who else is going to do it? Your business is going to be posed at a higher risk, but you can reduce that by, of course, getting yourself educated, getting yourself informed in this field, staying up to date in this trend, signing up to newsletters, getting information. Thankfully, the internet is information right now. We're in an era where there's a swarm of information available online. There are free resources available online. You can, as small business owners, you could leverage on that. Could leverage on that, and not just for yourself, also for your employees. And like I said, it's not why you also do that. You also have to, build a solid plan for that, to ensure that, okay, at this while I'm doing this, while I'm working on this, this is my plan to raise the funds to get a professional who could better inform me on how to go into this field and how to scale up in this area. So I think that is one thing to note, because I'm very big on education. Information is key. Information
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, Ola, any comments? And thanks, Mira, for providing that context. Education, education, education. Continuously educate your people, continuously talk about it, continuously find ways to evolve what you know. Whether it's through newsletters or whatever it is that you have to do, you need to be able to evolve. And then, Ola, any thoughts from your side?
Well, yeah, I'll
Okay.
just quickly, restricting it to SMEs really narrows the scope, right? Because you've got to spend this money, like if you want to, have a robust security, you've got to put in the personnel, you've got to spend the money and then licensing fees
Yeah.
and cost and all of that. But if I could just segue from Mirab, education is critical, right? It's very easy. It takes a very weak link to infiltrate a system, right? So you have to be aware, self-responsibility. Like, it's nobody's fault, it's yours, right? If you go with
Yes.
that mindset, it shifts a lot of things for you, right? If you see your remote environment or your laptop as a virtual office, like emphasis on office. Like if you have a physical store, like you most likely, put locks, put alarm systems and stuff like that. You wouldn't leave your shop untended in that sense of the word. So just carry that same consciousness, into your laptop or your devices, right? So you are solely responsible for everything. I think that consciousness shift a lot of things. And one thing that I would love to really, really, emphasize on is the zero trust model. Zero trust, man. Zero trust, right? Is your friend, is your co-founder. Like just like it's least privileged access. If they don't need it, don't give it to them. It should continually
Absolutely.
be on the need to know basis, right? If you're not doing anything that relates to that, so you have to put out it's not with security. You have to be uptight, you have to be strict, right? If you don't want to lose them. So it's zero trust. I trust you, my wife, to be honest. I trust you, but it's just for the integrity of this information. So if you don't need it, why should you have it, right? So
Absolutely.
you only have access to what is important, minimal level of access. I mean, this would protect and shield a lot of things. And then it funnels back to the very first thing. So you know that when there's a breach, it's your responsibility. That orients you in a way that it's nobody's fault, it's all mine. And then for those that may have to partake or share or have access to the same system, it's zero trust, right? And then I think it really, really narrows the scope, right? But I think if you follow ardently this, suggestion that Mirabad made, and the zero trust model, which I just proposed, that I think you are off to a good start, to ensuring, some form of security, for your system or not. Yeah.
Absolutely, Ola. I kind of agree. Trust nothing, trust everything has. If there's no trust established, no need for the information, then there's really no conversations to be had at that point. And Helen, the final word or the final word from you in regards to this? Any
Yeah,
final words?
yes, I think I agree with what both Merab and Hola said. I mean, around education, around zero trust, like always verify before you allow someone into your environment. And I think for a small to medium scale organization, to be very honest, I think it now depends on the scope of your work, right? But there
Yeah.
are big things that you can really do beyond education, the zero trust. Like I mean, part of the zero trust model also talks about feel secure. Feel secure means when there is an attempt to maybe a data breach attempt or whatever, and so somebody is trying to log in into your database or your main application, and after one or two attempts, rather than saying okay, you should try back in 30 seconds, automatically just lock the application. I mean,
Mhm.
that person is contact like a support team, so it like feels secure.
Yeah.
um Another thing would be, I think this would not cost really much, which is say boils down to education, like phishing awareness, phishing simulation. Send a lot of phishing, simulate a lot of phishing email attack and send to your employees. You don't even, especially with the small medium scale, that means you can be more than between 51 and 200. So you might not even need like a tool per se. There is AI. With the help of AI, you can actually craft nice email that looks really genuine and then send to your employees and see if they would actually fall victim into that. And one key thing that we would also look at is MFA. Luckily for us, all employees, I'm sure 90% of employees uses what's it called?
Multi-factor authentication?
Yes, I mean they use
Mhm.
mobile phone, and they use
Oh,
a mobile phone that could actually access the internet, right? And
absolutely.
it's not Nokia 231 or those kind of Nokia. And you can actually install Authenticator on your phone, right? And so MFA is like a simple thing, at least if even if you would not have anything with your password and with your MFA, you are kind of sure that okay, I'm secured. And then there are VPNs. I mean, I'm looking at remote space. There are VPNs that would not cost the whole world, that you can actually also use as an organization, as a small medium organization. And then especially when you have engineers or infrastructure team that works on core data, you need
Hmm.
to when you have like a segregation in your network, that means before you are able to access a particular tenant or a particular network segregation in your environment, you have to go through VPN. We call them production environments. Maybe for
Hmm.
low environment, if there's no sensitive data, you can actually go directly I'm talking from the
Yes,
perspective that
absolutely.
SME, they kind of employ like adopt cloud. And so you
Hmm.
can maybe log in normally, right, to the not so like the lower environment. But when you log into the like production environment, then you have to go through like a certain VPN, and it will not
Correct.
cost. I don't want to mention the more vendors that are not like
Yeah.
really. And even this cybersecurity awareness training, I mean, lots of security solutions, lots of security vendors are out there, and per user might be like maybe $2 per month per user.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, you don't get to spend more than $20 per user. And if you have like 50 employees, that means you're able to also, leverage these tools. And nice thing about cybersecurity right now is you don't need to have the old money as an organization before you can actually implement cybersecurity, because new vendors are coming up. I mean, go on LinkedIn, marketers will come to you and tell you why their tool is better than um,
Yeah.
some, Cisco, like, oh, Cisco is expensive, then come and use our tool. And it's actually really good, to be very
Yeah,
honest. Right?
absolutely.
Oh, why do you want to use checkpoint firewall? Come and use this one. And they will offer you at a very cheap or at a very
Yeah.
affordable price. And they also leverage new technologies as well. So I think it's cybersecurity is, if you want to go really expensive, you can go really expensive. And if you want to go really like, okay, low budget, I think there's also a space for a low budget. I mean, if you have like a low
Yeah,
budget for cybersecurity, there's always a space for that. I mean, don't mind me talking from the technical perspective. I know there is
absolutely.
education, there is phishing, there is zero trust, but you can also buy, all these antivirus that are not really expensive, and you can actually also implement that to your organization. And I think another key thing is, well, it's still part of education, log in from a secure browser. It's really important, that kind of thing. And then
Absolutely.
from a secure Wi-Fi, right? So that's
Yeah.
it's protected, and yeah, it's encrypted as well. So I think I don't know. I think I have a lot of things to. I don't know who is listening right now, but if you're like a startup, you don't need to have money like that big
Yeah.
budget before you actually have cybersecurity. Please, there are some things that you can do, and you still meet regulations. You meet PCI DSS, you meet ISO without having to
Hmm.
spend a bunch. Yeah. So yeah.
Absolutely. And you make a great point, especially when you're talking about MFAs, whether you're even doing a proxy servers, right? To kind of sit in between your front end and your back end. So you're able to kind of filter out whatever that it is before it hits your back end, if there's an inquiry. Merrick, I see your hand is up. Did you have something you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, just something else I just wanted to, include with my experience with from my experience with small business owners. I think another important thing to also note is structure. And
Mm,
having a small business, no matter how small, should not eliminate the fact that there should be structure. And another important area I also like to point out that in is communication. Having clear communication channels. So
Hmm.
When something is off, you could easily pick it. You could easily sense that, okay, so that is also key. And there's a mistake that some small business owners tend to do because they're trying to cut down on, expenses. So they tend to want to go for should I say, cracked versions and all of that. Pay the money for the premium software and use it. Just pay
Yeah.
the
No free versions. Don't get it for free. There's the free is
Yeah, they are
expensive.
good free, they are good free software. Don't get me wrong, but that
Yeah.
cracked one you want to use, just pay the
Yeah.
money for the premium one and use it.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Cheap is always expensive.
oh,
Cheap is
exactly. So
can be
that's
very, very expensive.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that thought. Thank you everyone who has contributed to this. Go to our very distinguished panelists from Ola, Kepemi, Ellen Oluyemi, Merab, Dr. Ireti, to each Amatu who's been the organizer of this, to everyone who's been able to join us live. This is our first roundtable discussion. There will be more. But it's so great. I want to say special thanks to you guys for joining us today, sharing your professional experiences, your thoughts, and what it is that other people too could learn from this. Right? Cybersecurity is real. The threats are real. The risk is real. Pay attention to it. It's all about building the right culture. It's all about having the right people. It's all about integrating the right processes and also thinking about security by design. That said, I do want to say thank you, everyone, and bye for now.